I never thought a piece of paper could destroy my entire life. But when I finally read the fine print of that prenup 3 years into my marriage, I realized I'd signed away everything that mattered. My children's future, their inheritance, their security, all of it, gone with one signature I'd made 5 years ago. Let me back up. My name's Rachel, and when I met Connor 5 years ago, I thought I'd won the lottery. He was charming, successful, came from money, old money, the kind of family that has portraits in the hallway dating back to the 1800s. His mother, Patricia, well, she was something else entirely. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Connor and I met at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was there with my friend Jessica, both of us in dresses we'd saved 3 months to afford, trying to network and feel like we belonged. He walked up to me with this confident smile, holding 2 glasses of champagne, and said something cheesy about how the artwork paled in comparison to me. I rolled my eyes, but I was hooked. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. It was a whirlwind, the kind of romance you see in movies. Weekend trips to the Hamptons, dinners at restaurants I couldn't pronounce, flowers delivered to my tiny apartment every Friday. I was a middle school teacher, making $40,000 a year, and he was in a different tax bracket entirely. When he proposed, his mother requested a meeting. Just the 2 of us. Woman to woman, she said. I should have known then. I should have seen the warning signs flashing like neon lights in Times Square. Patricia invited me to their estate in Connecticut. The house was massive, intimidating, with marble floors that echoed when you walked, and staff who moved like ghosts through the hallways. She sat me down in her sitting room, this place decorated in cream and gold that probably cost more than my parents' entire house, and slid a folder across the coffee table. She said, very calmly, very sweetly, "Rachel, dear, you understand that Connor comes from a certain background. We have family traditions, family expectations. This is just a formality, really. Every woman who marries into our family signs one." I remember my hands shaking as I opened that folder. The prenuptial agreement was thick, maybe 40 pages, full of legal jargon that made my head spin. Patricia assured me it was standard. Protection for both parties, she said. She even had her lawyer there, a stern man named Mr. Whitmore, who walked me through it. Or so I thought. He explained the basics. In case of divorce, I wouldn't get alimony unless the marriage lasted 10 years. The house would remain Connor's. His business assets were protected. Fair enough, I thought. I wasn't marrying him for money. I loved him. I didn't care about his family's wealth. There was a section about children. Mr. Whitmore glossed over it quickly. Something about family planning, he said, making sure both parties were ready for children. Seemed reasonable at the time. Connor and I had talked about wanting kids someday. I signed it. God help me, I signed it without reading every single word. Patricia smiled, this tight little smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Welcome to the family, dear." The wedding was beautiful, expensive, everything Patricia wanted. I would have been happy with something small, but Connor said his mother had dreamed of this day, had planned it for years, even before knowing who he'd marry. That should have been another red flag, but I was too in love to notice. Our first 2 years of marriage were happy, really happy. Connor was attentive, loving, everything I'd hoped for in a husband. We lived in a beautiful townhouse in Brooklyn that his family owned. I kept teaching because I loved it, even though Patricia made little comments about how I didn't need to work, how it looked odd for a member of their family to have such a modest profession. Then I got pregnant with our first child. We were thrilled. I called my mom, crying happy tears. Connor picked me up and spun me around our kitchen. We started planning the nursery, picking out names, dreaming about our future. That's when Patricia requested another meeting. She came to our house this time, which was unusual. She typically summoned us to the estate. She sat in our living room, perfectly composed in her Chanel suit, and said, "We need to discuss the child's trust fund." I didn't even know there was going to be a trust fund. Connor looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat beside me. Patricia pulled out another folder. This one had my prenup in it, along with several other documents. She said, "According to the agreement you signed, Rachel, all children born of this marriage require family approval before they can be added to the family trust. It's Section 12, Paragraph 4. My heart started pounding. Family approval? What does that mean? Patricia smiled that cold smile again. It means the family board needs to review and approve each child's eligibility for inheritance. It's tradition. We need to ensure proper lineage, proper upbringing, proper education. Connor finally spoke up. "Mom, that's just a formality. Obviously our child will be approved." But something in Patricia's eyes made my blood run cold. She said, "That depends entirely on Rachel's cooperation with family standards." I asked what standards. She laid them out like she was reading a grocery list. Our child would need to attend specific schools, starting with a particular preschool that cost more than my annual salary. We would need to move to Connecticut, closer to the family estate, so Patricia could be involved in the child's upbringing. I would need to stop working, because it was inappropriate for a mother in their family to have outside employment. And here's the kicker, the thing that made my stomach drop. All major parenting decisions require my approval. Medical care, education, extracurricular activities, even the child's name. It's all in the contract, dear. Section 12 has subsections. Many subsections. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Connor was pale, looking between his mother and me. I managed to say, "I never agreed to that. That's not what was explained to me." Patricia's expression didn't change. "You signed it. Mr. Whitmore went through everything with you. If you didn't read it thoroughly, well, that's unfortunate, but legally binding nonetheless." After she left, Connor and I had our first real fight. I was crying, furious, terrified. He kept saying it would be fine, we'd figure it out. His mother was just being controlling like always. But when I demanded we get our own lawyer to review the prenup, he hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. He said, "Rachel, if we fight this, if we challenge the family on this, they could cut me off completely. The trust fund, the business, everything. I'd lose my position in the company." I stared at the man I married and asked, "What about what I lose? What about our child's freedom?" He didn't have an answer. I got my own lawyer anyway. Used money from my savings account that I'd kept separate. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Diana Chen, read through my prenup with increasingly wide eyes. After an hour, she looked at me with something like pity. She said, "Rachel, this is one of the most restrictive contracts I've ever seen. Legally, you signed away decision-making rights for any children you have with Connor. The family approval clause means that if you don't comply with their standards, they can declare your children ineligible for any inheritance. Not just trust funds, any inheritance whatsoever." My voice was shaking when I asked, "Can they really do that?" Diana nodded slowly. "It's unusual, arguably unethical, but you'd be surprised what holds up in court when both parties sign willingly. The question is whether you were properly informed of all terms before signing. Did you have independent legal counsel?" I hadn't. Patricia's lawyer was the only one present. Diana said that might be grounds to challenge it, but it would be expensive, lengthy, and uncertain. The family had resources I couldn't match. They could drag it out for years. I went home that night feeling like I was drowning. Connor tried to comfort me, but his words felt hollow. He kept saying we'd make it work. We'd follow his mother's rules for now, and eventually she'd ease up. But I could see it in his eyes. He was afraid of his mother. afraid of losing his comfortable life. Our daughter Emma was born 7 months later. She was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, my nose, Connor's eyes. I held her in the hospital and made a silent promise that I would protect her from Patricia's control. But Patricia was there within hours, already making decisions. She'd arranged for a specific pediatrician, one approved by the family. She'd enrolled Emma in that exclusive preschool, the one that cost $60,000 a year. She'd even hired a nanny without consulting me. A stern woman named Mrs. Kowalski who reported everything back to Patricia. I tried to push back. God, I tried. But every time I disagreed with Patricia's decisions, Connor would get a phone call from his father or uncle. Pressure from all sides. The message was clear: comply or face consequences. The breaking point came when Emma was 6 months old. I wanted to take her to visit my parents in Ohio for Christmas. Just a simple trip, a chance for my mom and dad to spend time with their granddaughter. Patricia said no. She said Christmas was a family tradition at the estate, and we were expected to attend. I told Connor we were going to Ohio anyway. It was my daughter, my family, my decision. He looked terrified. He actually begged me not to go, said it would cause problems we couldn't fix. I went anyway. Bought plane tickets, packed Emma's things, flew to Cleveland. My parents were overjoyed. We had a beautiful, simple Christmas. My mom made cookies with Emma's handprints in them. My dad read her stories even though she was too young to understand. It was perfect. Until we got home. Connor met me at the door with divorce papers. His hands were shaking as he handed them to me. He was crying, actually crying, as he said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. My mother said if I don't do this, they'll destroy us both. Please, Rachel, we need to work within the system." I couldn't believe it. He'd filed for divorce because I took our daughter to see my parents for Christmas. Because I'd defied Patricia. But here's where it gets worse. So much worse. The divorce papers included a custody arrangement. Connor was asking for full custody of Emma, with me getting supervised visitation only. And the reasoning, the legal justification his lawyers provided, was that I was in violation of the prenuptial agreement's parenting clauses. By taking Emma out of state without family approval, I'd breached the contract. Diana, my lawyer, was furious. She said, "They're using a prenup to determine custody. That's not how this works. Prenups are about assets, not children." But Patricia's lawyers were good, the best money could buy. They argued that the prenup established a pattern of agreed-upon parenting standards, and my violation of those standards demonstrated poor judgment. They had documentation of every time I disagreed with Patricia's decisions. Every argument, every pushback, all of it carefully recorded by Mrs. Kowalski, the nanny. The custody hearing was a nightmare. I sat there listening to their lawyers paint me as unstable, unreliable, incapable of following basic agreements. They made my trip to Ohio sound like I'd kidnapped Emma. They questioned my fitness as a mother because I insisted on working instead of staying home. Connor barely looked at me. He sat with his mother, who had her hand on his shoulder like he was a puppet, and she was pulling the strings. At one point, the judge asked him directly if he truly believed I was an unfit mother. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw everything. He was weak. He'd always been weak. His mother's control over him was absolute. He finally said quietly, "I think Emma needs stability. My family can provide that." The judge didn't give Patricia everything she wanted, thank God. I got joint custody, but with restrictions. Emma would live primarily with Connor. I could have her on weekends, but I couldn't take her out of state without written permission from both Connor and somehow Patricia. The judge bought into their narrative about family stability and established parenting agreements. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I'd lost everything. My marriage was over, My daughter would be raised under Patricia's controlling thumb. And I'd signed the papers that made it all possible. But I wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. I started documenting everything. Every interaction with Patricia, every decision she made for Emma, every time Connor chose his mother over his daughter's well-being. I recorded phone calls, saved emails, kept detailed notes. Diana said we needed to build a case showing that Patricia's control was harmful to Emma. It took time. Emma was 2 years old when I finally had enough evidence. Patricia had become even more controlling, dictating everything from what Emma ate to what clothes she wore. She'd fired 2 nannies for being too friendly with me. She'd enrolled Emma in activities that kept her busy 7 days a week, structured every moment of her life. And Connor was miserable. I could see it during custody exchanges. He looked exhausted, trapped. Once, when Patricia wasn't around, he said to me, "I don't know how to get out of this. She controls everything. The money, the business, even where I live. If I go against her, I lose it all." I wanted to feel sorry for him, but I couldn't. He'd chosen this. He'd chosen money and comfort over his wife and daughter's freedom. Then something happened that changed everything. Connor's father, Richard, had a stroke. He survived, but it left him weakened, unable to manage the family business. Patricia had to step back from her obsessive control over Emma to handle business matters. For the first time in 2 years, there was breathing room. I used that time wisely. I filed a motion to modify custody, armed with all my documentation. Diana brought in an expert witness, a child psychologist who testified about the harmful effects of Patricia's controlling behavior on Emma's development. We showed emails where Patricia berated Connor for letting Emma play freely instead of following her scheduled activities. We had testimony from the fired nannies about Patricia's unreasonable demands and constant criticism. The hearing took 3 days. Patricia sat in the courtroom every single day, glaring at me like I was her mortal enemy. Connor looked like he wanted to disappear. But the evidence was damning. Even the judge, who'd sided partially with them before, looked disturbed by some of Patricia's emails. One email in particular stood out. Emma had fallen and scraped her knee at a playground. Connor had taken her to our regular pediatrician, not the one Patricia had approved. Patricia's email response was vicious. She wrote, "You will take Emma to Dr. Morrison tomorrow for a full examination to ensure you haven't caused permanent damage through your negligence. If you cannot follow simple instructions regarding our granddaughter's care, we will need to revisit custody arrangements entirely. Remember, Connor, everything you have can be taken away." Everything. The judge read that email aloud in court. I watched Patricia's face remain completely calm, like threatening her own son was perfectly normal behavior. In the end, the judge modified custody. Emma would live with me primarily, with Connor getting standard visitation. More importantly, the judge issued an order restricting Patricia's involvement in parenting decisions. She could be a grandmother, but she had no legal authority over Emma's upbringing. Patricia's lawyer immediately stood up and said, "Your Honor, this violates the prenuptial agreement between Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. The family approval clauses specifically outline." The judge cut him off. "Counselor, a prenuptial agreement cannot supersede the best interests of the child. This court determines custody based on what serves the child, not what serves a contract between adults. The prenup has no bearing on these proceedings." I wanted to cry with relief. Finally, someone saw through Patricia's legal manipulations. But it still wasn't over, because there was still the matter of Emma's inheritance. Patricia made it clear that with the new custody arrangement, Emma would not be approved for the family trust. She sent a formal letter to my lawyer stating that Emma was being raised outside family standards and therefore was ineligible for any inheritance from the family estate. Diana said, "She can't actually do that. Emma is Connor's biological child. She has inheritance rights regardless of any prenup." But Patricia's lawyers argued otherwise. They claimed the prenup established Emma's inheritance as conditional, not automatic. And because I'd violated the terms by not raising her according to family standards, those conditions weren't met. It went back to court. A different kind of hearing this time, focused on inheritance law and contract validity. This is where things got really interesting. Diana brought in a contracts expert who testified that the prenup I'd signed was unconscionable, a legal term meaning it was so one-sided and unfair that it shouldn't be enforceable. He pointed out that I'd had no independent legal counsel when signing, that terms weren't properly explained, and that the contract gave Patricia rights over my children that no reasonable person would agree to if they understood the implications. Patricia's lawyers fought back hard. They brought in Mr. Whitmore, the lawyer who'd been present when I signed. He testified that he'd explained everything thoroughly, that I'd had plenty of time to read the document, and that I'd signed willingly. So, I took the stand. I was terrified, but Diana had prepared me well. I told the truth. I explained how intimidated I'd been, how desperately I'd wanted to fit into Connor's family, how Patricia had presented the prenup as a formality that every woman signed. I admitted that I should have read it more carefully, should have gotten my own lawyer. But I'd trusted that my future mother-in-law wouldn't put anything truly harmful in a family document. The opposing lawyer tried to make me look stupid. He asked why I didn't read a 40-page legal document before signing it. He suggested I was just after the family money and now regretted that the prenup protected it. But then Diana asked me one simple question. Rachel, if you had known that signing this prenup meant your children could be denied their inheritance based on Patricia's approval, would you have signed it? I looked directly at the judge and said, no, never. I would have walked away from the whole relationship. No amount of love is worth signing away my children's rights. The judge took 2 weeks to make a decision. Those were the longest 2 weeks of my life. I barely slept, constantly imagining worst-case scenarios. What if the prenup held up? What if Emma really lost her inheritance because I'd fought for custody? Finally, the ruling came down. The judge found that the prenup was unconscionable and unenforceable regarding the children's inheritance. He ruled that Emma had full inheritance rights as Connor's biological child, and no contract between Connor and me could eliminate those rights. The family approval clauses were void. But here's the thing about people like Patricia. They don't give up just because a judge rules against them. She changed her will, completely rewrote it. Instead of leaving her estate to her children and grandchildren, she established a foundation. The family wealth would go to charity, managed by a board she controlled. Connor and Emma would get nothing. It was legal, completely within her rights. She couldn't use the prenup to deny Emma her inheritance, so she simply eliminated the inheritance entirely. Connor was devastated. He came to me, actually came to my apartment, and broke down crying. He said, "She's cutting me off, everything. The business, the trust fund, all of it, because I didn't fight harder against the custody modification. Because I let you win." Part of me wanted to comfort him, but a bigger part of me was angry. I said, "You let me win? Connor, I won because I was fighting for our daughter's well-being. You were fighting to keep your mother happy? Those aren't the same thing." He looked at me with these empty eyes and said, "I don't know how to live without the family money. I've never had to. I don't even know who I am without it." And that was the saddest thing I'd ever heard. This man, my ex-husband, had no identity outside of his family's wealth. Patricia had made sure of that. But something unexpected happened. Connor started therapy. Real therapy, not just the kind where you complain for an hour. He started working through his relationship with his mother, understanding how she'd controlled and manipulated him his entire life. It took months, but slowly, I started seeing glimpses of the man I'd fallen in love with. He got a job, a real job, not a position in the family company. He became a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm, using his business degree for the first time in his life. The pay was a fraction of what he'd made before, but he seemed proud of it. He moved into a modest apartment, downsized his whole life, and he started really showing up for Emma. Not just during his scheduled visitation, but actually being present. Playing with her, reading to her, taking her to the park. Not because Patricia had scheduled it, but because he wanted to. One day, about 6 months after the final court ruling, he asked if we could talk. We met at a coffee shop while Emma was at preschool. A normal preschool this time, one that cost a reasonable amount and focused on play-based learning instead of academic pressure. He said, "I owe you an apology, a real one. Not for the divorce or the custody fight, but for ever letting my mother control our lives. For signing that prenup in the first place. For not protecting you and Emma from her." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was still angry, still hurt. But part of me could see how hard he was trying to change. He continued, "I've been meeting with a lawyer. I'm challenging my mother's new will. Not because I want the money, but because Emma deserves her inheritance. It's her birthright, regardless of how my mother feels about our choices." I asked, "Can you even do that? Challenge a will before someone dies?" He smiled sadly. "Probably not successfully, but I can make it clear that I'll fight it when the time comes. I can document her pattern of manipulation and control. And I can make sure Emma knows that I tried." Something shifted between us that day. We weren't getting back together, that ship had sailed. But we were becoming partners in parenting, maybe for the first time ever. Patricia, predictably, was furious about Connor's newfound independence. She tried everything to bring him back under her control. Offers of money, threats, guilt trips about family loyalty. When none of that worked, she tried to turn other family members against him. His siblings stopped talking to him. His father, still recovering from the stroke, refused his visits. But Connor held firm. He told me, "I spent 35 years living for her approval. I'm not doing it anymore. Emma deserves a father who makes his own choices." Emma is 4 now. She's happy, healthy, and blissfully unaware of all the legal battles fought over her future. She loves both her parents, sees her grandmother Patricia occasionally at supervised visits, where the woman actually has to act like a normal grandparent instead of a controlling tyrant. As for the inheritance, who knows what'll happen? Maybe Patricia will stick to her guns and leave everything to her foundation. Maybe Connor's legal challenges will work. Maybe by the time it matters, the whole family dynamic will have changed. But here's what I learned through all of this. No amount of money is worth sacrificing your autonomy. No relationship is worth signing away your rights or your children's rights. And those red flags I ignored when I was young and in love? They were red for a reason. If I could go back and talk to 26-year-old Rachel, standing in Patricia's sitting room with that prenup in front of me, I'd tell her to run. Not walk, run. I'd tell her that love shouldn't come with contracts and conditions and family approval clauses. I'd tell her that real love supports your independence, not restricts it. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is learn from our mistakes and fight like hell to protect what matters. Diana, my lawyer, has become a friend. She told me recently that she's seen an increase in prenups with unusual control clauses. Wealthy families trying to maintain power over their children's spouses and grandchildren. She's been giving talks at law schools about unconscionable contracts and the importance of independent legal counsel. I went to one of her talks, sat in the back of the room listening to her use my case as an example. It was surreal, hearing my life story presented as a cautionary tale. But if it helps even one person think twice before signing something they don't understand, Then maybe all this pain served a purpose. Connor and I have dinner together once a week now, with Emma. It's nice. Weird, but nice. We talk about normal things, like Emma's preschool friends and whether she should take swimming lessons. We don't talk about Patricia unless necessary. We're building a new normal, one where we're both free to make choices without fear. Last week, Emma drew a picture of our family. She drew me and Connor and herself, all holding hands and smiling. No mansion, no staff, no Patricia hovering in the background. Just the three of us, simple and happy. Connor looked at that drawing for a long time. Then he said, "This is what I should have fought for from the beginning. Better late than never, I guess. People ask me sometimes if I regret marrying Connor. If I wish I'd never met him, never signed that prenup, never had to fight those legal battles. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain. I regret the years of stress and fear. I regret that Emma's early childhood was marked by custody fights and court hearings. But I don't regret Emma. Not for 1 second. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. And in a weird way, I don't regret learning the lessons I learned. I'm stronger now. I know my worth. I know that I can fight powerful people and win. I know that I can protect my daughter no matter what. The prenup that almost stole my children's inheritance taught me something valuable. Read the fine print. Ask questions. Get your own lawyer. Don't sign anything when you're intimidated or pressured. And most importantly, don't let anyone, not even someone you love, convince you to give up your power. I'm still a middle school teacher, still making my modest salary. Emma and I live in a small apartment in Queens. Nothing fancy, but it's ours. No one controls our choices. No one approves our decisions. We're free. And that freedom is worth more than all of Patricia's money combined. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd read that prenup carefully before signing. If I'd seen the family approval clauses and walked away. Would Connor have fought for me? Would he have stood up to his mother? I'll never know. But I do know this. The person who walked away from that marriage isn't the same person who walked into it. I'm not the naive young woman who signed away her rights for love. I'm a mother, a fighter, a survivor. Patricia still sends formal letters through her lawyers occasionally. Reminders that Emma is not approved for family benefits. Warnings that any attempt to claim inheritance will be fought. I file them away and don't respond. She can't hurt us anymore. The courts made sure of that. Connor says his mother is getting older, more fragile. The stroke his father had scared her, made her think about mortality. He thinks maybe, eventually, she'll soften. Maybe she'll want a real relationship with Emma before it's too late. I'm not holding my breath. People like Patricia don't change easily. Control is too addictive, power too intoxicating. But if she does change, if she does want to be part of Emma's life in a healthy way, I won't stop her. For Emma's sake, not hers. The other day, Emma asked me why we don't live in a big house like Daddy used to. I told her that big houses are nice, but what matters is who you share your home with and whether you're happy there. She thought about that for a minute, then said, "I'm happy here with you, Mommy." And that right there, that simple statement from my 4-year-old daughter, is worth every legal battle, every sleepless night, every moment of fear and uncertainty. I won, not because I got money or property or revenge. I won because my daughter is growing up free from Patricia's control. She's growing up knowing that her mother fought for her, that her father learned to stand up for what's right, and that love doesn't come with conditions and approval clauses. The prenup that almost destroyed us ended up being the catalyst for our freedom. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what actually matters. So, to anyone out there facing a similar situation, to anyone being pressured to sign something they don't understand, to anyone trapped in a relationship where control masquerades as love, read the fine print. Trust your instincts. And know that you're stronger than you think. Your freedom is worth fighting for. Your children's future is worth protecting. And no amount of money or status or family approval is worth sacrificing your autonomy. I learned that lesson the hard way. But I learned it. And now Emma will grow up knowing it too. That's the real inheritance I'm giving her. Not money or property or social status, but the knowledge that she has the right to make her own choices, live her own life, and never let anyone control her through contracts or manipulation or fear. That's a legacy worth more than any trust fund Patricia could ever create.